Welcome back to another episode of the RAG podcast with me, Sean Anderson, the CEO and founder of Hoxo Media. This is the show where I bring to you a different recruitment owner every single week who's prepared to tell their story of how they've gone from a startup to where they are today, the highs and lows in between, and more importantly, where the hell they think our industry is going post-pandemic. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Jonathan Keane. Jonathan is the CEO and founder of Cognitive Group, who are an expert recruitment company who focus on the Microsoft talent acquisition and recruitment space. Headquartered in London with just over 30 staff. I met Jonathan a few years ago. We laughed because we also bumped into each other in a chicken shop, so we don't know what came first. I think we did a video for you about 3 years ago, and we always met up at the TRN events. We always got on well, so I'm delighted to have you on the show. John, welcome to the RAG podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Not a problem, mate. Not a problem. I even put my specs on so we'd look alike today. I don't always wear them, but I've realised my eyes are awful. Like I'm staring. I keep telling people on, because you're always on a screen now. I'm like, can you just zoom in on that? Can you just zoom in on that? And then I realise I think it's me. So I better put these back on. John,
you need them for the screen.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and they look quite cool, I think, as well. It's all about the image, John. It's all about the image. John, do us a favour. I've given you a basic intro, but give us a better overview of the business and your role as it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we focus on the Microsoft talent stack, everything to do with digital tech hiring, but as long as there's a Microsoft platform to it. And we've built teams for many of Microsoft's top consultancies, the big four, and their end customers. Yeah. We do that. 90% of it is in the UK market, a little bit in Germany, and a little bit in France at the moment.
Right. Okay. You haven't done the US move yet.
We dabbled with it. Yeah. We'll probably get onto this in a little while, but we dabbled with working from the East Coast from here.
Yeah.
At the same time, trying to do this, build a German desk and a French desk, which probably wasn't the smartest thing to do all at the same time. Mm-hmm. But we dabbled with it, and we're getting a lot of customers ask us, can we help, in a US market. At the moment, we're saying no to that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's we'll get onto that. Yeah. But I literally just got off the phone to a client this morning who was telling me about a bit like, so at Hoxo, I've basically taken the role recently to focus on our academy business, and my business partner Emma has taken over the agency business. So we're effectively like co-CEOs now, two businesses, and I've just spoke to an agency that have done the same, and the way they've split it is one of them is just taking over the US opportunity because he sees the fees are just ridiculous. Like he said, this is in renewable energy, but $32,500 average fees. I was like, it's almost double what they get in the UK. I was just like, wow. Crazy stuff. John, you founded the business circa 14 years ago. I'd like to go back. So what was life like? Paint the picture. Like what was before you started, when did you know you wanted to be a recruitment owner? Like what was the moment you realized you were going to do this?
It probably started with leaving school and working for my father's company. He had a blinds and security door shutter company. And he discouraged us from joining, university. He said, "Why do you want to go to university?" And the answer was, I want to get right skills and join a big company. And he said, "Well, I've got a 50-person company, and I'll teach you everything you want to know." And there was a bit of a standoff, and ran out of beer money. And eventually, instead of joining the sales team as punishment, I had to join the operations team, and then kind of work my way through his business, a bit of marketing, and eventually was sort of running, a significant portion of his sales. And I think, growing up in a family where there's lots of entrepreneurs, my sister, has owned restaurants, she owns gaming companies and all sorts. You always knew was going to do something entrepreneurial.
Wow. Where did you grow up, John?
I grew up in South Africa.
Right.
My dad's Rhodesian, Greek, Irish, and my mother's Scouser background. Right. So I always knew at some point I was.
Whereabouts in South Africa were you?
Right on the coast, in a small little beach town.
Wow.
It was fairly quiet. It was beautiful, great in the summers, but quite boring for a teenager in the winters.
Your accent, you can hear it. I think you told me this in the past, and now that you've said it, I can hear your accent. The reason I say is I'm listening to Trevor Noah's book. Do you know Trevor Noah, the comedian? I literally just started his audio. I just started his audiobook, Born a Crime, yesterday, having been recommended. And all I can say is wow. Like the introduction. I just listened to Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights, and I thought that was good. The way he told the story was I just loved it. And this one from Trevor Noah, I mean, I'm learning a lot about South Africa just from the book. Like I know a bit about the history, but I wouldn't profess to know a lot. And wow, crazy. So, okay, so you grew up in South Africa and you're surrounded by entrepreneurs. And the business that your dad ran was a South African company, was it?
Yeah, across several towns, and he'd ran it for 40 odd years. That's where I learned to do sales. Was a field role, so you were going to people's homes and advising them on what to buy, where, and when. There was one main competitor who my dad had actually set up that business and sold it. Right. And that became the rivalry between the two businesses. That was always a bit of fun.
Wow.
And the other thing I didn't mention was I grew up in a Jehovah's Witness household, right? Very religious, and so one of the things that I knew probably from an early age is that I probably didn't feel as religious as maybe my family did, right? And was looking probably for an escape at some point, and so moved from living at home where you had all your cleaning done and everything, to think about that. And everything you were earning was kind of pocket money. To London was quite a big move in 2000.
Why London? What made you travel across the world?
I think you
had the visa from your mother. You had the passport, I suppose, from your mother, right?
Yeah, the ancestry made it quite easy. That was sort of the only logical destination. And I had a friend that I'd grown up with, right, who was a Jehovah's Witness, and he had escaped to London, so to speak. And you've got to come. There's so much anonymity. You can just be whoever you want to be.
That's true.
That I found really attractive. So he, his name was Ray. He helped me a lot, encouraged me several times over. This is what it's like. The weather's not as bad as everyone makes out. The people are amazing. There's people from all over the world, and I loved the sound of that. So I made the move and moved into their house share.
Where was it?
In Wimbledon Chase.
Wimbledon, right?
It's a little place, Oxford Road, Oxford Avenue, and it was their single spare room that they all used when a visitor came. So we had a single bed, and the room had as much space as half of the single bed, and one small door and a window, and that was it. It was £250 a month.
What year was that?
That was October 2002.
So I went to uni in 2004, paying probably, I think in Sheffield, it was probably about the same, about £200 a month. So in London for that, and that was for like a huge room. So in London, I mean, even then the prices were ridiculous, right? They've always been sky high.
Yeah, they were paying 650, 700, and I think they were happy to see their bills lower or whatever. But I had to keep my suits in Ray's bedroom in his cupboard. So I pick out what I wanted to wear, and if I forgot a tie or something, I have to knock on the door. Go, Ray, are you up? Can I grab my tie? So it was a lot of fun.
That reminds me, when I moved to Australia, we got a flat. Me, my brother, and Amma, my business partner, and we moved into right next to the Grand Prix at the Albert Park in the Australian F1 is. I didn't realize it was there when I signed up, and then when we moved in and the F1 started and the house literally shook for 3 days. It was pretty cool. But my bedroom had a window that looked into my brother's room. It was an internal room that they created. So when he if he went to the toilet in the night and turned his light on, I thought it was the morning and started getting ready. It was like the things you do when you're younger. Like it was awful. It was awful. But go on, back to your story.
Yeah, well, I'd saved up working for my dad. I'd saved 1,200 quid to make the move, and I was so excited and so grateful for Ray for encouraging me over and picking me up at the airport. I said, well, tonight is on me, this weekend is on me. And of course, wow. I spent 275 odd pounds of it. We went out and ended up in a club and I don't know what else. Yeah. And then severely hungover after 3 days and had his old Motorola phone and the kind of yellow pages with sales roles, and started having to call around looking for a sales job. So that was interesting, and looking at the pile of washing from the weekend, and wondering how does the washing get from there back into my cupboard. I was thinking, what have I done? Went for a few interviews, had a few jobs to become a field sales rep again. But Ray mentioned that Abraxas PLC, who he was working for, which was a tech recruitment company, right, were actually hiring, and the sales director, his wife, who used to be the managing director of another recruitment company, she was actually their internal recruiter. And so what you'd have to do is you'd call this phone number, her phone number, and she'd deliberately not answer it. So you'd leave a voicemail to hear what you'd sound like. And then if it was good, she'd call you back. You'd have an interview. And then, yeah, started a journey where Abraxas and a few others, offered. The one was recruitment. It felt more safe because, Ray was doing it.
Yeah.
And joined Abraxas.
Wow. And how long were you there for?
5 years. 5 years. Because I'd done sales repping for my father, I always had a briefcase. It had samples, a quote book, a pen, a tape measure. And that was kind of my safety blanket. Like when you're a kid, you walk around with your blankie or your teddy.
Yeah.
That bag was my safety blanket. So I turned up to the interview at Abraxas with this bag, and a few of the people saw it. They were like, what's he got in his bag? Is that just his lunch? And so I only found out later there was this debate about what was in there. It was nothing other than a sandwich.
Oh, I had a guy. Do you know what? At Venquis in London, we had this guy in the team. When I first joined, he was already there. He was a character. He was basically a resourcer. He was about 20 years old, and he acted 45, talking about his mortgage and all this. He was hilarious. But he had this bag. He had like a record bag every day over his shoulder. And we all said the same thing. What the fuck? We didn't have laptops. What's in the bag? One day, someone was like, show us the bag. He's like, no. And we're like, show us the bag. We could call it bullying, but he opened the bag and he had a can of deodorant and an apple. I was like, you travel across London with a can of deodorant and an apple. He's like, yeah, well, I like the look of it. I was like, brilliant. Safety blanket, same thing.
Yeah, so I met the sales director, a guy called Jake, very charismatic.
Right.
And him and I really got on, and he asked for my story. And of course, I left out the bit that I was working for my family's company.
Yeah.
So I thought that would kind of, denigrate what I've been saying. And then he introduced me to the top biller, a guy called Jerome. A really nice, affable guy, super charming. And we got along quite well. So I think Jake and him said yes, and the other team leader wasn't so keen and said no. But, thankfully, two people sort of backed me. I'm forever grateful. That kind of started my recruitment career.
Yeah.
And, I got lucky in the first sort of 3 months, just beating like crazy, working to the VB6 old technology market, and heard there was this new thing called .NET, which obviously is very old, and managed to win a couple of consultancies, did fairly well. And because I'd kind of seen Jerome and what he was doing, I kind of sort of go to Jerome's gym and ate where Jerome ate for £5 every lunch. And I couldn't afford it. I was still on like a 14 trainee budget. So I ran out of money pretty quickly and realized that, I need to work a little bit harder. But I think in the first year, I finished 4th after winning a couple.
How big was the team?
20 odd. So it was the Perth division, the whole company got 120 on one floor. And then I think my second year I finished 3rd, so the 200s, and then 3rd, 4th, and 5th year I was sort of top. I was incredibly competitive because as a Jehovah's Witness, you couldn't play sport. It was sort of deemed extracurricular. I played sport, but I had to play with my other Jehovah's Witness friends, 2 or 3 of them, and they weren't particularly any good at sport. So when I got the opportunity to compete in a sales league, this was my time. And there was so Abraxas was amazing. It was a big company, but a family feel. There were lots of characters. There was an Italian guy called Gennaro, and he'd just stand up on the floor and shout. And there was a couple of people rich who would sing. It was really bizarre, but amazing family feel. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And
is it from there that you started the group?
Yes, yeah. So I thought about leaving after 4 years, and my sales director said, didn't you make a promise that you were going to beat the all-time perm record, which was set by a guy from Melbourne called Dave Lansfield, who now runs a company from Singapore. And he reminded me in the final year, I got to 407. I had a team of, I think, 9 or 10 at the time. But the sales director, Jake, had then left. We had sort of a caretaker leader. They offered me the perm manager job, and I felt there was so many layers before a decision was made, and you would hear that something's been decided, but you never felt like you had input.
Yeah.
And that reason, that was sort of the time when I thought I'm thinking about leaving, and do I go and join a headhunting company, or do I do it myself? And I was firmly on the headhunting let's go to the next company and find out how you move from doing 15 grand fees to 30 grand fees.
Yeah.
And there was a guy who sort of changed the course of my career, Keith, and he had worked at Abraxas previously, been a team leader, and left to set up his own recruitment business. And then in the 2000s, that business, along with many others, didn't make it. I think he got to 15 odd people. And I quite liked the fact that, I was sort of confident anything could happen. I'm the top biller. Of course, I'm going to be great at this. And he was like, yeah, you got to be a little bit careful. You can think about your finances and what if your first deal doesn't come in. So the two of us sort of having quite a few gin and tonics and talking about it. And we decided to do it together.
Yeah.
And so in sort of 2006 time, we set up Cognitive, and we had a couple of names. One was Dexterous. We thought that sounded quite arrogant, but Cognitive sounded like you're developing the learning of your customer and your candidate.
Yeah.
That felt like you're advising and supporting your customer to be better at the way in which they identify and attract talent. So we set off on our little journey.
And what was paint the picture? What was day one like?
Well,
back in that bedroom for 250 again.
Yeah, well, we actually took an offer straight away. We didn't think from someone's bedroom would work. But we'd come from one United Kingdom house, which was Abraxas on Oxford Street. We had MTV above us, Barclays. All then we moved to this little office in Victoria. Almost looked like my bed set. 2 desks, nothing on the walls, tiny little window. The blind was sort of half cracked. Onto another building, that old stuff. The internet was intermittent. We set up with our PCs. We didn't have laptops in those days. And we looked at each other and we was like, what have we done? This is terrible. Starting to call people, and no one's ever heard of us. We called ourselves Cognitive Consulting in those days,
right? And
started calling through the yellow pages. We had restrictive covenants like everyone else. We couldn't work with our existing clients and all those good things, and had to start doing BD. And we look onto job boards to see who was advertising. There wasn't particularly Microsoft focus. It was just, is this person advertising? Does that job look good? Can I find who the hiring manager is? And BD them. And, we didn't have a particularly good value proposition other than, saying we're confident we can fill it and we've got access to all the databases, as you used to say in those days. But we won a few clients in telecoms and gaming, a couple of Microsoft partners, and off we went.
Did you, looking back, did you enjoy those days? Like, what was the best part of the earliest moment you can remember in that business?
I think the exhilaration of the fear. Now, I don't know if have you ever skydived?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
I'll never do it again. But the fear of you could lose everything. It's almost, I can imagine what a gambler feels. I don't gamble, but that fear of, I've gone from earning 120 grand a year, Abraxas with safety. I've got 2 mortgages, and I could risk everything. Like if I don't hit a purple patch, it's gone. And that feeling, and it was just the two of us, and we were free to decide what we do when we do it. That was quite exciting. But had I known what it was really like, after the first week of excitement, and then it becomes pressure, right? Yeah. Where's the first customer coming from? I probably wouldn't have done it so soon. The first year's tough. We all know it. You know it. It's hard. It really is, especially when you're not earning. You just see your savings going down and down and down, and there's one after another. And with the best laid plans, everything costs a little bit more than you thought, and there's costs that you haven't accounted for. So the first year was tough. We build well. I think we did 300-400 grand in our first year between the two of us. Keith sort of gravitated towards more the operational aspects of the business and sending out contractors and financing, and I focused on sales and winning customers. So it was exciting, especially when you do your first deal and then your first deal drops out. The excitement of high-fiving each other, and automatically so we just stop working and go to the pub and celebrate.
I think I spoke to someone in the first few months of Foxo, and I was like, a recruitment owner who was like a year in, and he was like, "Yeah, we don't work Fridays anymore. We just if we hit a certain amount of deals in, we just don't work Fridays." Yeah. And I was like, "That sounds amazing!" Like at that time, I was like, "Yes, I can choose whether I want to go in or not." Yeah. What happens is you do go in because you're like, I've got loads to do, and it. I think that I said this, I think last week. For me, the first year was actually, I didn't feel as much pressure, maybe because I did something new and I was just like this absolute naive kid. Year 2, I felt more pressure. I felt like there was something to lose in year 2 because I brought a couple of heads in, and we had a bit of a business then. Because in year 1, I kind of had I was 30 years old. I just bought my house. I had a decent bit of money behind me, and I thought I can just go and get a recruitment job if it really struggles. I know I can do it. But I was doing something new, completely new. I guess you wouldn't necessarily want to go and get a recruitment job if you were already doing the same job for yourself, would you? It's like it kind of defeats the object. So you get to 400 grand in year 1, which is pretty good money, right? It's really good effort.
Yeah, I don't remember what the invoice numbers are. That was the new business, new deals, the invoicing. I don't recall the number.
Did you know then you wanted to grow headcount? Did you know you wanted a business other than just the lifestyle type stuff?
No, we'd worked out that between us, once we got a head of steam, he was, he'd done similar numbers to myself in his heydays, and we thought we could earn a significant amount of money. And my goal was to actually have a property business, and to every year keep buying a property or two and letting that grow in that portfolio. And it wasn't because I thought that was the best investment. It's just the only thing I knew. I'd read Rich Dad Poor Dad, as everyone has. Property the way to go, and had one already, and a couple, another one with a couple of family members, and thought, why don't I build an empire of property? And recruitment's such an amazing well to feed this property village. But in reality, it didn't quite work that way.
I had the same thing. I literally went to the Rich Dad Poor Dad seminars as I was leaving my job, and was like, yeah, we're going to do recruitment and we're going to build a portfolio. And then it was like, and we're going to do marketing. So we had 3 things we were going to do in January 2017. I mean, it's literally absolute. I didn't buy any properties. I've got one, and that's it. The truth is, I don't think you've got enough brain power to consciously do both. Not in the early days anyway.
No, absolutely. And that's one of the bits of advice that I got from someone who's an investing cognitive and is still a board member, was just focus on one thing. Get your footing in one business. Don't try and start your property businesses and everything else. Get this business really up and running before you think of anything else. And that was probably one of the best bits of advice I ever got from a chap called Carl, who's helped me immensely over many years. So I think the turning point was when you could sense there was a recession coming, and Keith was a much smarter guy than I. He'd co-written, I think, one of the only books on seahorse breeding. He was a photographer. Wow. He just had so many hobbies. You'd catch him on his screen at lunch, and he'd be looking at lenses that could peer around a corner with light and things. And he turned around. He'd gone through I think it was a divorce. Engagement stuff. It was a big life event, and just said, I've been in recruitment for a long time, and I don't have the heart for another recession. I really fancy becoming a photographer. And so we parted company, ended amicably, and all those good things. And I think we had about 20 odd contractors out with Game, the high street retailer. Yeah, they had a big transformation project, and we had project managers and business analysts on that with another consultancy. And so bought him out for a substantial sum, and literally the week after the money hit his bank account, the client turned around and said, we're cancelling the program. It was leading up to December. Oh, wow. we had 4 contractors left. And then when you're sitting on a big book, and I know you've had a really big book before, you kind of get a little comfortable.
Of course you do, yeah.
And so it was quite a nice little kick to you need to go out and win some more business. And I think the hardest time I ever did was the year after, where I worked on my own, building back the business up and working out what I wanted to do. Took on a couple of advisors that I'd met along the recruitment journey at Braxis, and just started to talk to them about what other people had done. In our setting up of the business, Keith knew Sean Zimdale from Aston Carter, when I met him and said, what would you do differently? And his view is, I'd stay super niche. I wouldn't do broad bash, super niche, 40, 50 people, but highly productive. And so around about sort of 2009, 10, decided to really grow it, to start growing it. And there was, I think one of the turning points was there was a chap, Steve, had previously worked with me, and he was at another business doing data and BI, and he came on board, and someone had gone through the training program at Abraxas. He was clearly one of the brightest trainees there, and he joined my team and worked into me as a resource at some point. He was leaving recruitment, heard about that, and convinced him to come and join. We sort of kicked on from there.
I'm interrupting this episode of the RAG podcast to bring you a message from our sponsor, Odro. You know by now that Odro are the #1 video interview platform for recruiters around the world. Now, they keep bringing out new features, from Odro Capture to Odro Producer, and it just keeps getting better and better and better. But now, recently, they've just announced a new feature to the platform, which is a complete game changer. During COVID-19, they realized that the recruitment audience, the communication was changing. Globally, their clients and candidates were using Microsoft Teams and Zoom more than anything else. The phrase, let's jump on a Zoom call or jump on a Teams call, has actually replaced the words video interview for a lot of their conversations over the last 6 months. Now, they were thinking, how are we going to eradicate this? How are we going to make Odro the name that everyone talks about for the interview process? And they realized they didn't need to. They needed to integrate. So for the first time ever, they're the first video interview platform on the planet that have decided and managed to integrate with Zoom and soon to be integrated with Microsoft Teams. So with one click, after recording a Zoom video, you can now drag that into Odro and create everything else that Odro has, from adding the CV, the heat maps, the capture, and the producer elements. You get all the benefits of Odro before and after the interview, but you get to use Zoom, which is client-friendly on all levels. So this is massive. Teams is coming. It's the first time anyone's ever done it in our sector, and it is literally going to change the way you work in 2021. Get in touch with my friends over at Odro at odro.co.uk, or if you're already a user, reach out to your account manager to make sure you've got this feature. Back to the show.
Go back to that year when you're on your own, because that's a little bit like the pandemic. It's isolation in a different form. But what was it like back then? Because now obviously you're on your own. You can go and work in a WeWork. You got co-work. We work there. You work there. There's co-working everywhere. You can be on your own, but with Zoom and the connectivity, you never feel. In some ways, we're more isolated than we've ever been, but in other ways, at least we have the digital economy around us. What was that actually like back in 2008, 2009 or so when you were doing that?
Yeah, the connectivity was very low, wasn't it? And going into an office, trying to keep the same rhythm of going in, being in for 8 o'clock, being on the phone by 8:30 is tough. And there's days where the cricket's on and you want to see a score, or you think, oh, I really fancy a new pair of sneakers. Shall I go and look for trainers? And I think holding that discipline was tough. I didn't really take many holidays. You think that everyone goes, oh, you work for yourself, you must be enjoying loads. I was like, it wasn't. You're working more harder than ever. And because you're delivering yourself, everything you win, you've got to make sure that you've promised to a customer. So it was tough, but I enjoyed it. You learn a lot about yourself, and I think in that junction, you realize that I don't like working on my own. I love being around people. When you do a deal or win a customer, or win more work with a customer, you want to celebrate it with somebody.
Yeah.
And you want to, when someone else is down, you want to be able to pick them up. And if you don't have that, it can feel quite isolated. In between when Keith was, and I set up the business, was a chap that we'd worked with, and I won't name him, but he'd set up an asset finance business on his own, and we kind of said, why don't you come and join us? And we took bigger offices, and we said, well, it's fine, you haven't got the cash right now, we know what it's like, we'll spot you the rent for the next 6 months. We took a bigger office, and then he said, oh, my first few invoices aren't coming, and we spotted him $5,000 before, and then he disappeared.
Wow.
13 grand. So when Keith and I departed, we'd actually moved from a small office to sort of a 5-person office. And I was in a 5-person office for a year.
On your own.
Which was, paying a lot of rent.
But that's the problem as well back then. And I mean, look, there's still a lot of agencies and companies now that are tied in, but everyone was in such strict leases back then. There wasn't that fluidity of contracts like we have today. So you've you've managed to get through some difficult times there. And then you say you brought a couple of people in and you started to kick on. So take us through that journey. How linear was the growth of the business then, from sort of you plus two upwards over the next few years?
Yeah, there was a recruiter, internal recruiter, working for one of our good clients, Helen, and we'd always hit it off. And she loved, sort of a quality-based approach and all those good things. And she was thinking about potentially going agency side, and she joined. And so very quickly, sort of, 3 became 4, became 5. She won the Barclays account. We won a number of other, big 4 consultancies from Steve. And before you know, we had enough roles to get in a few delivery consultants. And the classic, you win a Microsoft project at Barclays, and they go, well, you've done that really well. Can you help us with this finance platform called Charles River? Like, yeah, why not? And then they said, could you help us with a Java developer? And we'd gone from being quite sort of niche to eventually being all things to everybody. And when someone asked, what do you do? We'd explain all those things. And so we got to about 2012 when we'd had a mobile division, someone who'd worked with previously, and that had sort of 2 or 3 people. And we had all these disparate things, and we were too industry focused for a 12-person company. And I think about 2012, we decided to specialize in the Microsoft space. And that was when we started to incrementally starting to grow, bringing in people that focused on the retail space for Microsoft.
How did you choose Microsoft as the one?
I'd love to say it was some amazing strategy, and we knew Microsoft was going to do so well, but Microsoft wasn't SaaS back then. A lot of the technologies were quite sort of officey. There was some interesting, development type technologies where there were big projects for EasyJet and booking systems and things. But I think it was the thing that we knew the most. And you think about what makes a recruiter valuable, amongst their characteristics and their traits is who they know. Mm-hmm. And how willing that network is to receive a call from you, a request from you, and ask for an introduction for you. And that was the area that we knew the most. And we had a number of customers that we were doing, 1s and 2s placements sort of every 2 or 3 months with, and started to think, how could we turn these into some really big accounts? And there's one particular client that was he was a business development manager at the time when we first met him, and now he's the CEO of this European company. And we've worked together all these years. We probably WhatsApp each other every day, and just following client relationships. And I think our client relationships were in the Microsoft space. And that was the point where we started to do really well. And, Nigel Frank were absolutely killing it. And so we knew that there was more in the Microsoft market than we might have initially thought.
I interviewed for Nigel Frank in 2012 when I came back to London, when I moved to London, And I was I went to their London office. I was really impressed, actually, with the billings they were showing me people were doing. I was like, wow, like incredible. The only thing I didn't like back then was it was a global role. So you'd have to find people in Germany and Switzerland, but they weren't sending you anywhere. So you were literally just going to be sat at your desk calling globally. And where I worked in Australia, in Melbourne, was a Victorian government role. So I used to recruit for the government, and that is a square mile of buildings. So I used to spend 30% of my time in coffee shops, meeting candidates and clients. And I loved it. I loved that bit. So when I then spoke to Venquis, who were a change and transformation recruiter, and they said it's Lloyd's of London Market Insurance, and it's literally the gherkin all day, every day. I was like, get me out there. And I literally lived in Leadenhall Market and the surrounding areas for 5 years. So how was it similar for you? Were you like the Nigel Frank model, where you were all like, you'd have a project in wherever around the world because you're so technology focused?
We were only in the UK.
Did you focus on the UK?
Yeah, only in the UK. We came up against Nigel Frank a lot, and they've done an amazing job building the Frank business. At one point, they approached us and made an offer for our business. I think where we competed was on some of the big accounts, and maybe some of our relationships held quite strong, and they thought, could you come and be sort of the headhunting or executive part of the Frank Group? But culturally, I think we're miles apart. Yeah. Maybe there was a silly, looking at their growth, maybe that was a silly mistake, but culturally, it didn't feel right for what we were trying to build.
How did you find the turning that's the saying no to business that was outside of Microsoft, to go from that, because what you said, I've seen so many times. You're a product of your own success. You do well, they offer you something else. You're like, yeah, why not? And before you know it, you've lost your niche, or you're just technology, which is too broad. How bringing that back into a clear focus, how did that feel? Because you would have, I'm sure, had to have said no to things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always hard to say no to business. But then there's also that sort of vindication at the point where you do say, we've got this particular focus. I think Sky was one of our customers, and they were hiring lots of data analytics people. At the time, we said, look, we're not going to be able to help you to the volumes. And, they were like, are you sure? We're hiring 10 people a month, But then when you start to see one candidate that you had on a journey previously with one customer one candidate goes to 3 places. And the guarantee is that candidate's going to get 2 offers, and they're likely going to be placed with you. And so your conversions go from having to find 4 or 5 candidates per role to finding a candidate. And because they're in the Microsoft space, you can say, what are you interested in? You're interested in working for Microsoft? You're interested in working for consultancies, for end customers? Is a particular industry, technology? So you can actively advise them, and they know that you know the market. So therefore, they're much likely to work with you than work with 5 different agencies, and the other 4 processes, you don't control.
Yeah.
So I think it was difficult, and certainly for a few of the people that were working other technologies, we said, you could join the Microsoft, focus, or we'd understand if you want to leave. And pretty much everybody, barring a couple, said, I can see the Microsoft part of the business is the most profitable. Let's focus on it.
A final interruption to today's episode to introduce Vincere. Vincere is the all-in-one CRM ATS platform built for the recruitment and staffing industry. Now, I first heard about these guys about a year ago. The amount of prospect recruitment agencies and clients I was working with that were telling me they were moving over to Vincere, I had to look into it. And what I found was a business that had a global reach with multiple offices around the world. So they've got this follow the sun methodology, which allows them to support recruitment businesses wherever you are and be in your time zone. But the technology that they've invested in is becoming a disruptor in the space. More and more recruitment businesses are doing this to give their recruiters a competitive advantage. They broke into the G2 Crowd's Momentum Grid as a market leader based on their reviews from their customers. So the agencies that are using this platform are raving about it. Now, if you're a RAG listener and you're thinking about changing CRM, or you're a new business looking to launch with a new CRM, then I would get in touch with these guys, because if you mention that you're a RAG listener, they're doing an amazing deal. By visiting www.vincere.io/RAG, you can get an exclusive deal which offers 2 months completely free on a 2-year commitment, or 3 months completely free on a 3-year commitment. This applies to all licenses that you've either signed up for now or that you'll add in the duration of the contract. So get on there and have a look. Finally, if you're listening and you're a recruiter and you're thinking, I want to move into a more of a business development role, and I'd like to keep hold of my recruitment knowledge. Well, these guys are recruiting for a BD person, multiple roles in both Sydney and London right now. So if you've got a strong recruitment background, you want to move into BD, and you want to work for a fast-moving tech business that's helping people like you right now, then get in touch via their website, because they're hiring today. Back to the show.
So how did the business grow as a result of that decision? What was the obvious return on that investment?
Yeah, we reached the point from, not being particularly profitable to getting to the 600, 500, 600, 700 grand profits. So those were some really good years. Yeah. I suppose the years prior to that were some of my most testing, when, we'd taken on people, we had a massive project at Barclays, which then curtailed. And you suddenly got outgoings which exceed your incomings. Dipping into my, had a mortgage current account. I don't know if anybody's familiar with those, but having to dip into that twice to sort of fund the business. That your mortgage that's online, and I'd sold one of the other property, the investment property, to fund some growth. Yeah. Because that was quite a scary period. And then coming into this period where suddenly we started to generate, 500, 600, 700 grand of profit. And do we invest that, or in this case, I thought, actually, let's keep that in the business. Let's keep that for a rainy day that we know we're never going to risk everybody's livelihood. Yeah. Because of, some of the growth that we're taking. And from there, we won a number of big projects, a couple of the big consultancies that you wouldn't expect would work with a, small company like ours, picked us because they, heard of our case studies with other, competitors.
They love the focus, right? They love the absolute focus you had.
And I think that's something I've realized over the years, that clients aren't impressed with scale. You can tell them we've got offices all over the world, and they go, great, so how are you going to actually help me? I'm in this office. I don't care about everything else you're doing.
Yeah.
Can you talk me through a couple of problems you've solved that are similar to mine? Have you hired a general manager? Can you talk through 3 or 4 examples? Have you hired a VP of consulting? And it's nice when you're not drawing on a bit of smoke and mirrors and something else you heard, and it's genuinely a case study, and that turns to a customer going, I'll work with you, and generally at better fees.
Yeah. That sounds, I think that's the bit that I think a lot of new businesses or businesses that have been around for a while need to really think about, in terms of, the vanity numbers. People get impressed by throwing things around. I look at people's LinkedIn, and part of my program and through the academy is to just really look at what people say they do on their LinkedIn. And I've got a thing where I think most people talk about themselves way too much and share stuff that people simply don't care about on your profile anyway. Like, if I've got 3 seconds on your profile, I need to know within 3 seconds, can you help me? That's all I care about, because I don't give a shit. It sounds blunt, but I don't actually give a shit. I'm really busy. I'm time poor. I've got problems and ambitions. And if you can help me achieve an ambition or solve a problem, I might then scroll a bit further. And it's exactly that. People are so selfish. They're the CEO of their own company, the star of their own movie. If you can't solve their problem today, they're going to move on. Like, it doesn't matter how great you look on a global scale. I think that's a brilliant way of putting it. So growing the business then, I mean, over the years, we talked about it a bit offline. So you're at 30-ish people now. And I think that's a really pivotal point in a recruitment agency growth story, because not many break through that. Not many to be honest, not many get past 10. I think I told you 81% of the industry is sub 10 staff, sub 1 million turnover. So you've broke through that. And then I've interviewed people recently that have got to 70, 80, 100, 500, 700. But there's still a huge difference, I think, from 30 onwards. It just changes. So how have you found, firstly, getting to 30 and then trying to break through that point over the last few years?
Yeah, it's kind of the 2 steps forward, 1 back. You had James Kahn on here a few weeks ago. There were a couple of things that he said that resonated. One of which was this journey where you kick out from the teens to 20, and you get to 25, and you go back to 22, and you get to 27, and back to 25. And I think we've like most businesses, potentially got caught in that. Let's open offices let's open capability in other countries because it sounds good. When people say, "What do you do?" and you go, "I've run a company in multiple countries." It sounds amazing, but no one says, "Well, how productive are those people?" And we got into this instance where, just by virtue of our sales director, he's worked at the S3 group through a number of brands. He knew a couple of people. One was a German consultant, another one was working the US market. We bought a small company in France, 1-person company, and was all in the Microsoft space. And we were competing with her and our customers. We said, why don't we bring the businesses together and we'll run the delivery from the UK. And so we had the UK business, which has always been the most profitable business, all our key client relationships, trying to set up all the administrative stuff for Germany, the same for New York, and the same for France. It was crazy. And in retrospect, if I say, what would I do again? I would only do one of those at a time. Why were we trying to grow different markets so quickly? And I think that was probably ego. I think a lot of times your ego is something you genuinely want to do because you enjoy it. So we sold that business back to the founder in France. We've continued in Germany, and we stopped during the pandemic. We stopped the East Coast business. It never was profitable. It was sucking up a lot of funds from the UK. So I think for our focus is very much the UK market and Germany, and then there's a couple of customers also in France that we're helping with specific assignments.
Yeah. So that do you think that attention across multiple areas then actually stopped the UK potentially from moving further forward than it would have?
Definitely. I think I don't know if we spoke about this beforehand, but we're hearing lots of companies going to the US, and it's almost like that sort of promised land of everything will be amazing there. But sometimes, with the UK market, the market that you're in, how much market share have you got? I look at the amount of jobs in our market, in the UK market, we're touching a fraction of that. So there's so much more, and how much easier it is to onboard somebody in the UK working your own market than starting a complete market from scratch. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing just because we've had a couple of misses and one hit. But I think I think differently about it. And when we do it, we do it with an investor, not just money, but smart money. Money is easy to get, but smart money, someone who's done it before.
Yeah.
And probably go and hire 15 people at once in the US rather than piecemeal. That would be one of the learnings from trying it and not succeeding first time.
So right now, then, is it all UK, or do you still have a footprint in Europe?
UK, Germany, and a bit in France, but we're doing it from the UK.
Yeah, you're all together.
That's the other thing with the pandemic. Often clients in other countries would say, "Do you have offices in our country?" And now that everything is on Teams or Zoom, clients, they don't care.
No.
So you can work cross-border more than ever.
Well, that was my next question then. So take us back to 2020, March 2020. Firstly, what was February 2020 like? Because I don't know, I have this weird golden haze looking at February 2020 before we knew what was happening. And then how did it all unfold for you personally?
Yeah, so we were on course to generate our first £1 million EBIT this last year. So our year started in September, and we'd had our two biggest record months, September and October, a few good months, and then February was a 420 grand month for us.
Wow!
So we were flying, and we were all in such a good mood. Just hit another record. People are earning well. And of course, the pandemic hit and all those good things. And it was the strangest feeling where you don't know whether the world is going to survive. In the first few weeks, where just everything shut down. And we took the decision not to put anybody out on the street. There were a couple of people that on performance management decided you can't put people out on the street. March, April time when you knew they wouldn't find work. So we kept those people on our payroll regardless. And we kept a nucleus of people working. We said to everyone, targets are relevant now. Why don't we use this opportunity to come out of it with much stronger relationships? So when we're calling people, contractors who are out of work, clients who having to lay off people, let's just find out what they're dealing with. Let's just ask how we can help. In addition to that, we send Mindful Chef boxes to all our top clients, to our staff, just to let them know that, when shit hits the fan, we're going to look after people and put our arm around them. And I think that really brought our team together. I think there's more unity because we were jumping on calls. So how was your week? And everyone's like, I don't want to lie. I've spoken to a few people. There's not one job. It's really difficult. And Paul, the sales director, trying to drum up excitement with people, but also saying, be honest. I know it's tough, and thank you very much for just working hard. So it was tough. There was, quite a few of the team. I think if you look at the billers, what's exciting is a number of them have organically reached that principal team leader stage, and so they were experienced people, but none of them had experienced a pandemic of that nature. So I think we weathered it quite well. Even when our clients weren't recruiting, we knew they wouldn't. We kept in touch with them. We kept calling them, asking them about whatever else they were about, just a conversation. And they knew it was just a conversation. And we'd start the conversation by saying, we know that you haven't got any business at the moment, but just to let you know, I'm hearing this, and I've heard actually this one's just one of. And they'd love the conversations because they wanted the eyes and ears of the marketplace. We talk to 20, 30, 50 people a week each. We know more than our clients do. And so they love to, even if it's a little bit of gossip or a little bit of a fact, they wanted to hear that. So I think we weathered it quite well, despite our contract book sort of got cut in half, that and the double whammy of the threat of IR35. That was probably the most galling thing about the pandemic.
Yeah, it came all at once, yeah.
Yeah, to build that back up. So, I mean, how was it for you?
Yeah, you're one of the first guests who's asked me that question. It was all right. I mean, we went into it with we had a record February, we had a record month, and it was our third year anniversary on the 5th of March. So we went to this. We all came together, and Billy, my account director, had just been to Rome on a little weekend trip, and the recommendation was that anyone who'd been to Rome could not, like, they should isolate. And we were like, it sounds really odd, but we zoomed him and was like, mate, we can't have you at the anniversary party. And he's like, what? And I was like, mate, I can't have you there. And I remember he's like, I'm coming to London anyway. I've got to meet up with some friends in the evening. I was like, I'm sorry, I know it's ridiculous, but we just can't allow you to come. And he sent me like this. His wife works for a bigger marketing agency, and they had this, like, you know, what's the word? A memo from their business about, you know, from the Department of Health and how it's okay and all this shit. He sent me this, and I said, look, I'm really sorry, I'm standing firm. That was a week before the world fell apart. And, you know, it's like, we laugh about it now. But the good thing was, he was one of the people in my business that a few months before decided to move away from London. And he had a 2-day-a-week in London contract, really. He was working from home for the rest of it. I just started to work from the gym a little bit, only because I'd seen other people working remotely. And when you're in a creative business, it's not really conducive to have your copywriters in an office all the time anyway. So I was like, you know, maybe, you know, it's not going to be that bad. We close the office for a bit. Didn't think I'd never go back to it. And then I started getting calls constantly from clients saying, Sean, you know, we had a lot of contracts that we had to amend, and, you know, we dropped fees and we lost money like everyone. And then there was a moment where I was like, I need to help more. Like, I need to do something here. I feel like people look up to me sometimes in industry as someone who's, you know, out there. So I went daily with this show. And I was like, I'm going to bring a daily bulletin from around the world from a recruitment owner, just to keep people's spirits up and find out how we're getting on, and trying to get one nugget of value every day. And I did 65 or 66 episodes in April, May, and June. And I burnt myself out. I was fucking knackered. I was absolutely knackered. But it was great for me as well. Every day I listened back to one of them the other day, because it was a client that I'm speaking to now about potential work. And I was flat as a pancake. Like, I was literally down in the dumps in April. I was like, welcome to the Rag Podcast. Because it was like, I didn't know what the fuck was going on. But a bit like you, it was a bit like your thing there, you know. It was like, it was my way of saying, you know what, when the chips are down, I'm just going to do my best at being out there for people. And it definitely paid off. Then I launched the Academy, which was based on people asking me, why, what you do on LinkedIn, how can I do more of it myself? I furloughed the whole team. I need to get back on the BD train. So the Academy was more of I did some free coaching. Then I thought I could turn it into a course. And now it's a whole business unit that in April this year, just now, I have now basically taken on to grow as a separate business. So in fact, it's been brilliant in many ways. My team is in South Africa. I've got 8 or 9 employees in South Africa now.
Wow.
Never met any of them. Will do one day. So the business has we've kind of gone global, but more from a fact of where talent is. Actually, we were able to look a bit wider for our talent pool. Not necessarily, we didn't like choose to go into certain markets. It kind of came to us a little bit. So that gets me on to, we talked a bit offline about the fact you're sat in a WeWork today. We've literally just signed a contract with WeWork for this global pass, where my team in Joburg, London, Manchester, we're all using it, or we will be next week. What's life like for you right now as a team, and how do you see as we hopefully come out this pandemic, as we're moving nicely forward? What's it going to look like? Yeah,
I suppose from a working pattern perspective, right now we're not asking anyone to come into the office. The office is, our office in Bank is 24/7. It's available. There's a number of people who work from their bedrooms, and mentally it's not good for them to be stuck in a bedroom, and they use the office I think 1 or 2 times a week. There's one person who cannot work from home, and he's worked, I think through the whole pandemic, he's worked from the office on his own. Just he wanted. So there's people starting to trickle through into it. I'm in a different WeWork today for a bit more focus and structure. From the 17th of May, we're going to move into 1 day a week. And after asking everybody in the company what they ideally would like as a sprint where they're most productive, the experienced people probably feel much more comfortable working from home. And the people sort of 2 or 3 years into career wanted 3, 4, 5 days from the office. So what we decided to do was say we're going to do Tuesdays and Thursdays from the 21st of June in the office, where everyone connects, experienced people, top billers, people who've just joined, all the Prosecco taps, beer taps are open, the barista, everyone gets to connect. And then for the other 66% of your time, the other 3 days, choose where works for you with your team. If that's from home or work or a different office. One of the things that I crave in my life is freedom.
Yeah.
And the Gallup does that research where it says if you want people that are highly productive, you've got to give them high clarity as to what does the company expect from them, what does good look like, what's their role, and then the other side is high freedom. And I think that high freedom bit, along with we before the pandemic, we started a 9-day fortnight, and it was something Microsoft.
I remember you announced it. Yeah.
Microsoft trialed it in Japan, and it lifted productivity. So we trialed it in November 2019, and we kind of just carried it on. We thought during the pandemic, our team really needed the time off. And to be fair, we didn't have a lot of work. So we just carried it on. And what we found since is that the team is much more rested. Effectively, it's 25 Fridays a year. So you're getting 45 to 50 holidays a year. Which is remarkable. But I think what we've encouraged the team to do is to say, we've got 9 days to do 10 days of work. We're not going to mandate that you start earlier, finish later. Just, you've got to find a way of being more productive. And if we manage you on results, maybe some of the other stuff that we used to do just for KPI's sake, we don't need to do those things. And so each person's got their deal generating activities as our sales director sets up. And the team leaders set whatever they think is their deal generating activities for their teams. Dave's one of our top billers. His team have got different DGAs to the next team. So I think that freedom to exercise a bit of control as to what does, not just everyone's going to do 20 CVs out to interviews. One of the discussions is, what does our customer need? Because we could do 2 deals each, but if the customer's saying, I need 5 each, have we actually had a good month? And so some of the teams will flex based on, our customers will hire a lot up until July, and then August, they all go on holiday. So it's that whole thing of doing more with your time rather than I'm going to turn up on a Monday morning, sit on my desk at 8:30, and because you've seen me there at the office, you think I'm productive. Well, you can't do that anymore. And so I think where we're going to is this. The thing that in recruitment is in short supply is business owners and leaders have to trust their team, and trust is earned. Yeah, I think we've got to give trust before it's earned now. Before someone would say, "Oh, do you mind if I work from home?" And in the old days, you think, "Oh, why is that? What they're going to slack a skive." Now it's the way it is. So you don't know whether Jenny or John or whoever else is working at 8:30, 5:30, and you can look at all the stats. Everyone's got the systems, but if you're monitoring that all the time and not talking about results, you drive the wrong behavior, I believe, especially with experienced people. Everyone that's at Cognitive has worked for a big machine. They've all worked for an S3 or a Randstad, and they joined because they didn't want that where it's one size fits all. Everybody does an hour and a half on the phone. Everybody does this. So I think what we've experienced so far is we're finding our way, especially those that have got kids and have worked 5 days a week for all their life. They love it. So many of them have picked up hobbies. Many of them are starting to, there's 8 of us or 9 of us that play golf, at least once a month, because we don't need to justify a day off. We don't need to justify it to other halves because it's a Friday. I know, one person goes for lunch with all her friends once a month and doesn't have to take a holiday. Another one says, I just love to do life admin so that I can have an actual weekend. So they do life admin.
How much holiday do you give them on top of that?
25 is standard, and then depending on length of service and or seniority, you get extras. Some people are
25 plus the Fridays.
Yeah,
incredible, isn't it?
Yes, it works out. I think it's 20. So it's 23 at the baseline, and then works up from there.
And how many? What productivity-wise? Since I know you've had the pandemic, so it might not be as easy to track it. But have you genuinely seen a positive or negative effect on productivity per head based on the 9-day fortnight?
Yeah, it's difficult to say because of the pandemic. I wouldn't say we're now massively more productive because, of course, the market's now bounced and we're doing some crazy numbers. And so you can't attribute that to just the 9-day fortnight. And I don't think we're any less productive. If I look at our outputs, we're probably doing the same. And of course, now the market's bouncing, we're doing some crazy numbers. But what I'm seeing is people are more well rested. On a Monday morning, people are like, another week. It's just like, I've just had a 3-day weekend. I'm up for it. Let's make things happen. And I think that balance of it feels like there's a bit of a societal shift where people don't want everything to be about work, and the weekend is my time just to literally relax and grab a cigar and a glass of whiskey to recover from what's just happened the last 5 days. So I think finding that blend of people that have world record amounts of time off to produce world record amounts of productivity. I think, if we did this in a year's time, I'll probably be able to give you really specific stuff.
Well, yeah, let's do that. I mean, I think there was the guys in down in the in Brighton. What's the name? David. What's his name? He did the 4.
Yeah. I spoke to them before we did it. I just said, does this work? Is it
MRL? They were the first, weren't they? They just did. I think was it the 4-day week? So it's not like 9-day fortnight. They did it every week. And he said it went up, and it went viral when he promoted it. And there's a couple of other brands that have done it. Nicholson, John Nash. They were actually the first, I think, to do it. But I think once we come out of the pandemic, and hopefully the pandemic is almost like behind us. It's not there yet. Then it's going to be like, right, flexibility of where you work, how many days you do. One question I have got, though, when it's busy like now, when you've got to make hay because there's roles coming out of every angle, do people still take that day off, or do they choose to work it?
Yeah, there's a bit of a grey area there where we don't force anyone to do that. Doesn't matter how busy they are. But is our world about us, or does our world start with our customer? And so what we've said is, if our customer needs us to set up a couple of interviews or be available for interviews, or we need to process a contract on Friday, our operations team will flip between the different Fridays. I've got a new business client call, an existing client, but they're looking for a senior role, and I'm helping somebody on Friday. I've got a couple of calls. I do a couple of calls. I don't mind if I'm on a tennis call and I've got to check my email. Fine. If I'm on a golf, sure. There's this one consultant principal, and he prefers to just. He just agrees that he just works a little bit less through the other week, and he's doing some crazy numbers. But he wants the freedom to work on the big things rather than you've just always got to be at your desk at 8:15.
Yeah. What about the trainee model? Are you avoiding those real trainees then, and choosing to bring people that have already been trained elsewhere?
This amount of flexibility doesn't suit people who haven't. I think what's great about the big machine recruitment companies is they teach you a work ethic that you've got to put a certain amount in. So you don't want to be teaching people to work. You want to teach them how to work better. And I think that's the 1 year to 2 years is probably our baseline.
That'll be probably a factor as well of why it's more difficult to get those numbers, because you're looking for a very attractive, very difficult talent pool there that everyone wants a 18-month biller. Like when I came from Australia to London, I think I was like, the perfect guy who'd done, I think I had 20 contractors out. I was leaving it all. I had no covenant. I was 26. I was moving to London. I had no money in my pocket because I'd spent it all on the way back. I was literally like, but I had enough knowledge of the contract market, of BAs and PMs, and, and I did really well, but there isn't that many of those people out there. Like if you wanted to get a graduate model in and you hire 50 a quarter and you're churning through it, that's where, when you get that organic ability to scale, that's the people I've interviewed have always, the ones who've got the bigger companies have always typically gone down that route. But it doesn't mean that, what I love about these conversations, people like you, like it doesn't have to be that. Just because Alexander Mann did it doesn't mean you want to do it. And there'll be other guys that are really happy being 3 people, and that's okay. There's this stigma that lifestyle businesses are like, it's a bad thing. It's a, what's the word? It's a substandard version. I don't think it is. I think it doesn't matter. The one thing I think about smaller brands when I meet them in recruitment is they tend to be a bit more chaotic. Tends to be a bit more, when you talk to the owners, they tend to be a bit more stressed. They tend to have a little bit, they're properly running the hamster wheel themselves. I think if you can keep it to 3 to 5 or whatever, but you work out actually how much business do I want? Can I handle? How many hours a day can I do? Or if you can, and then what parts of the job could I outsource or give to? You could have an amazing business at 3 to 5, but they take too much on at that smaller scale, I've noticed. So what is the future for you, John? Like if we look ahead, where are you heading? What's the last question on this stuff? Where do you see your future in an ideal world?
I personally feel completely revitalized. The last 80 years, if the pandemic was the worst year, this has definitely been the best so far.
Wow.
I think for the next 5 years, I believe it's going to be a real purple patch in the recruitment, especially in the tech and digital space. So I'm excited to see where we can grow the business to. I think a priorities is around profitability and getting us back to a £1 million run rate, and then maybe the year 2, 3, so the 2.5 million. So that's what I see over the next 3 years. I think the exciting bit is we've got a number of principals. I think five to seven people who are at the principal and are now naturally in their career saying, "I'm ready to build a team."
Yeah.
I think at that point now where you can absorb a couple of people who are trainees because they're working with one person.
Yeah.
And that person's going to build them, mold them, shape them in there. So if we could build, 5, 7 pods teams other than what we've got, plus we've got a head of cloud role for the UK, a data and BI role for the UK, looking for leaders, and then potentially someone to head up our European contracts team. So those are the external leadership capacity we'll hire. And I think that over the next 3 to 5 years will comfortably take us to 75 people. I'm not bothered about the number. I want our team to be well rested, earning in a couple of quartiles of income in the UK, and like many of our team who've got married, bought their first house, building their families and thriving. I want to create as much as that's possible for the people that have joined us, the new associates and consultants who joined us over the pandemic. I think we owe it to the people at Cognitive first, rather than just letting your ego get ahead of you and doing things that I've done in the past. And I'm determined not to make those mistakes again.
I know exactly how you feel, and I think it sounds awesome. We had 5 new starters yesterday. We have a people manager now. We have this onboarding playbook, which is built-in technology where people can watch videos and learn about the business. And it's amazing to think, we're at that point. I think we're 29 at Hoxo now, and I was just like, it's amazing. But the bit that you just said that mattered, that really resonated, was you want your people to be well rested. You want your people to enjoy it. Like I said, I've got a performance coach I spoke to last night, and he's like, what do you think? Like, what matters the most to you about this? And I was like, it genuinely is the people that have got to enjoy it. Like, they've got to enjoy it. Like, the last thing I want is the most profitable, well-known brand that my staff hate working for. I'd rather not. I'd rather earn less money and have I don't know. It really isn't about, to me, it's, if you've got people that genuinely love coming to work, they feel like they're respected, they feel like you care, like, the rest can happen. It will happen. Hopefully it'll happen. But that's an achievement within itself. Makes sense. But so what you strike me as a really intelligent bloke, and really someone who thinks about you. You've mentioned a lot in this episode. I think you think about the dynamics of growing a company and being a leader. Where do you get your inspiration or education from? What type of publications? Is there anything you listen to? Anything you've read that you could recommend for the listeners?
Yeah, I'm forgetting his name now. Put me on the spot. I could probably chuck it into the chat later. There's a couple of US podcasts I listen to. People who coach CEOs. I listen to things from Tony Robbins. I listen to Michael Pollan's book on changing your mind and what he's done. I'm forever listening to podcasts. I read The Economist every week. I read Money Week. I'm a ferocious reader, and I've always been like that. And if anyone is listening, that's I think just every day when you're scrolling football pages or the news, is try and convert that negativity into reading something. Try and read for 40 minutes a day. Read before bed. So I can't think of any books right now, which is crazy. I'll drop a couple in there.
No, but that's fine. I mean, the fact is you're reading, you're trying to better yourself with your reading rather than just brain dumping yourself with the latest crap online. One
of the best books that I've read was Money or Your Life by Vicky Robin, and The Simple Path to Wealth, which really changed my perception on what is wealth and your relationship with money, and what do you need to be happy versus what do you need to feed your ego. And since I've read those books, that was in sort of lockdown last year, just before, I've really changed my feeling about that intensity. I've got to grow, got to do something bigger, got to keep growing it. It's got to every year. And there's that pressure that you put on yourself, that it's It doesn't exist, and no one else is putting that on you.
You feel like everyone's watching, though, don't you? You feel like there's other people somewhere in like a room going, "He's not growing quick enough. We're going to beat him." Like that's how I feel. I feel like I've got some monkey on my shoulder going, "You're not doing as well as you could." You know, there's someone out there they're going for you, and you feel like I completely feel it, and it is totally an internal thing.
Even for this podcast, you know, you're listening to the people you've had on here, you know, 75 people, 100 people, 250 people. I was thinking, well, why do you want to talk to me? You know, I'm not in that league. We're not trying to be the biggest. We're trying to be the best, but you know, we're not the grand scale. We haven't got, you know, grandiose ideas about how big we can get it. So yeah, no, I'm pleased
you've got so much value to give, and you have given, John. Like it isn't about the biggest day. I think you got a great business. I loved working with you in the past, and I think you know, I think there'll be so much value people can learn from you, both through this and through connecting. Final question. What do your family in South Africa think of your decisions that you made, leaving and coming to the UK, and also starting your own business in a world that was very different to what, you know, you could have stayed and carried on in that space? What do they think?
It's a really touchy subject, because when I left the church, you get excommunicated.
Right.
So, once I moved to London, we kind of had our last conversation.
Really?
And we were allowed to, well, they're not allowed to talk to you when you're disfellowshipped. It's part of the religion. So you're allowed to speak once a year, generally. And if their health is bad, and it has been bad, we're allowed to sort of text, you know, every few months. And funny enough, yesterday, the 4th of May was their 53rd wedding anniversary. And so we had a WhatsApp conversation, and myself and another older sister, the other entrepreneur, she's also disfellowshipped. So the two of us are the black sheep. We're really close. But you know, I don't have any view on whether my dad thinks I've you know, built the business successfully. For him, he just wants us back in the church.
Really?
So yeah, I think getting the validation from dad and mom is never going to happen, and coming to terms with that is very hard. Very hard.
I bet. Well, I'd definitely like to do another episode and talk to you more about that kind of stuff as well. It's not all about business, but we have run out of time. Thank you, John. Thank you so much for your honesty, for your insights, for your knowledge. If anyone has listened and thought, you know what, I'd love to just reach out to him and ask some questions, are you open to a chat with people?
Absolutely. Yeah. LinkedIn's probably the best. I'm normally on that.
I'll tag you on everything that goes out. So guys, thank you, John. And thank you for listening. Anybody who's listening back, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've taken a lot from today. I ask every week, if you do, and you think there's someone in your network that John's story would resonate with, please share it. Get it out on WhatsApp, text, email, however you can, because together I genuinely believe this industry, I love this industry. You know, it's got such an interesting dynamic of people. It gets such bad press, but people don't really know what's going on. Once you get to know the people, I actually think, putting competition aside, we're much stronger when we learn from each other. And that's what the point of this show is. I'll be back again next week. I've got some amazing guests lined up every Wednesday. We're going to be running this season until the beginning of June. So we might have a little break after the beginning of June, but we've got, I think, 4 or 5 episodes that are going to take us up to the end of season 4. So I'll be back again next week with another episode. In the meantime, you stay safe, and I'll see you soon.